Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another book video. I haven't done like a proper sit down book video where I'm just going to talk your guys' ear off in such a long time. So these books I'm about to share with you are my top 10 of 2023. I was like, should I do 15? Should I do 23 for 2023? But I decided on doing top 10 favorite books. And also, while you're watching this video, comment down below what was your favorite read of 2023, or if you have a list, like if you have your top 10 books of 2023, comment down below. Okay, starting off with the book that I think is my favorite book of this entire year, which is really like a bold thing to say, but there's honestly no other book that I feel comfortable saying that about than this one, and that is this book right here, Before We Were Strangers. I've mentioned this book a few times throughout this year, and I don't think I'll ever be able to shut up about it. I just actually loved this book so much. It was a 5-star read when I read it, and it's still a 5-star read now, like after thinking about it for months and months after. This story basically shows you this like insanely beautiful connection that these two people form when they're young and they're in college and everything is just not that serious, and then they have a really big falling out and they don't reunite until years later when they're older and they have lives of their own and they have jobs and careers. But that connection that they formed when they were way younger was so strong that it really never went away. The connection and the chemistry that these two characters had was 100% my favorite part about this book. If you haven't read this book, I cannot recommend it enough. Honestly, it's so good. And my next book was another one that was just so easy to pick. I was like, absolutely 100% that was a favorite of this year, and that is this book by Abby Jimenez, Yours Truly. I'm sure you guys have heard about this book like 100 million times now, but you're hearing about it a lot for a reason, because it is so incredibly good. The relatability in this book, the representation, it was all done so incredibly well, and it's all packed up in this beautiful romantic story, but it also does have its deep moments, which I wasn't expecting. Both of the main characters, Brianna and Jacob, are so likable, which I love in main characters, because sometimes the romantic story could be really good, but one of the main characters could be a little off. But both of these characters, both the girl and the boy, were so likable and just perfect for one another in this story. So this was 100,000% one of my favorite reads from this year. Okay, another favorite book, and this one I'm really excited to talk about because I feel like it's not a very known book, and this author is also not very known, at least not like from what I've heard. I feel like I've heard about this book like once, but this book is not just one of my favorite reads of this year, it's also just one of my favorite books of all time now. This is Park Avenue Summer by Renee Rosen. I read 2 of Renee Rosen's books this year, and both of them are in this video. I genuinely don't know how to describe Park Avenue Summer. It's just a masterpiece of a book, and it's so incredibly good, and it'll make you feel all these emotions that you never thought were possible through a book. I feel like for me, a lot of the books I read don't really relate too much because they're either like kind of unrealistic and they're just like fun, or they're just like not too painfully real. This book felt really painfully real, but in a really beautiful way, if that makes any sense. Both of the books I read by Renee Rosen are historical fiction books, and this story is about Helen Gurley Brown, which I had never heard of before this book. She was basically the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine in 1965. The vibe that you get from this book, because it's set in New York City but in the 1960s, is literally one of my favorite parts of this entire story. It's just so cool to read about these people and like what they were doing, what they were wearing, and what was like frowned upon back then. Helen Gurley Brown was basically someone that came in and did things that women weren't really known to be doing then. This is just like such a girl boss story. It's really empowering, and it also really makes you realize how far we've come. If you want to read an empowering story that's literally going to make you want to get up and do something great, this is one of those stories that's going to make you feel that way. Okay, the next book is another one that's like such a no-brainer for me because I enjoyed this book so much, but I feel like I have to explain this one a little bit because I feel like this is one of those books that when you start reading it, if you don't know what you're getting into, it can kind of like ruin the whole reading experience for you. This story is probably like the weirdest story I've ever read, but it's also one of the most enjoyable reading experience I think I've ever had with a book. Let me just tell you guys like the gist of this story, and you can kind of like figure out for yourself if it's something that you might like reading. The story is about this girl that's like 26, 27 years old living in New York City. Both of her parents passed away and she inherited all of their money. So she's kind of like pretty wealthy, but she doesn't have any family, and she's at a point in her life where she's questioning everything. Like she's at a really low point. This girl pretty much feels like she has everything she needs to be happy and be living a happy life. She just can't figure out why she can't let herself be happy, and she basically makes the decision, and here's where it gets a little weird, where she wants to fall asleep for an entire year. She decides that she's going to be taking all of these pills, like endless amount of pills every single day, to keep herself asleep, because in her mind she thinks that when she wakes up after that year, she's going to be like a different different person. Like, it's basically like a life reset. So this story takes you through that year with her, where she's going in and out of consciousness, all the things that she's doing. So I feel like the only thing you really do have to know about the story is that it can feel kind of repetitive, but I don't know why that is something I actually found comfort in. Like, I don't know, I just really enjoyed this story. The ending of this book is one of my favorite endings in any book I've ever read. I like audibly gasped when I read it. It's just a really good deep story, but it's told in such a simple way that you don't even realize the depth of what you're reading. I just loved this book so freaking much, and this definitely became one of my favorite books of all time, not just this year. Okay, the next book is a book I actually read this month, and I read it in a reading vlog, so you probably already saw what I kind of think about it. This is Forever Interrupted by Jenkins Reid, and this was one that I was kind of like contemplating. I was like, is it one of my favorite reads, or is it just because I just finished it and I'm still kind of thinking about it? And I was also kind of conflicted about it because this book is so sad. Like, it is just such an incredibly sad story, but I also realized that if a book can make me feel that many emotions or literally make your heart break, then it's definitely 100% a good book. This is one of those stories that I would describe really heartbreaking, but too beautiful of a story to put down. Like, you can't help but keep reading it because it's just that good. The story is basically about a newlywed and how her husband dies literally less than a week after their wedding, so she becomes a widow less than a week after being a newlywed. The story takes you through past and present, past being how these two characters met and how they fell in love, and that was the part that was really like conflicting for me. And I said this in my reading vlog, because you go from reading about how they met and how they fell in love and how they had this like insane connection that just makes you really like root for love with them, and then you go back to the present where he's no longer there with her, and now she has to deal with all this grief. And just like I said, the story itself is really sad, and like you can't even fathom putting yourself in her position. Every single emotion possible, I felt it with this book, and for that reason I feel like this book definitely deserves being in my top 10 of this year. Okay, the next book is a book that I 100% did not expect for it to be in this list, and that is Love Theoretically by Hazelwood. I just thought it was gonna be like a fun, quick little read that you like while you're reading it, but you don't really think about afterwards. That is not what happened with this story. This book was so good, and don't let the cheesy cover fool you. I feel like sometimes with these covers, I'm like, oh my god, like it's not gonna be that good. Like, maybe I should read something else, whatever. But this story is so good. This is my third Hazelwood book, and I've enjoyed the other two, but this one is my favorite from all three of them. I literally devoured this book in like 2 days. I just couldn't put it down, but I also didn't want to finish it because I was enjoying reading about these characters and their story so much. So this was honestly a surprise for me this year, but I loved it. Okay, the next book is my only thriller in this list, but this is Alice Feeney's Rock, Paper, Scissors. I read this back in April, and that literally feels like it was like 2 years ago or something, but I remember reading this book and not being able to put it down. I don't want to say too much about this book because it is a thriller book, but it revolves around this married couple that is literally about to get divorced, but their last effort to sort of like save their marriage is to go on a weekend getaway to this like really secluded cabin in the mountains. As you can imagine, a bunch of things go wrong, a bunch of freaky things start happening. It's just really great. Okay, the next one is this one right here, and I'm really sad I'm not talking about the whole series with this book. That is literally one of my, like, starting January 1st, that is my main goal of the entire 2024 year, and that is to get better at reading series. I don't know why, like, I'll like the first book in a series or like the first or the second book, and I just never continue the series. Like, I always have another book waiting for me, so I'll start that one, and then by the time I finish that one, I already forgot about the series I was supposed to be reading. So that being said, that is why I'm not talking about the whole Magnolia Park series. I'm just talking about the first one. I already read the second, so I have 2 more books to go, but the first one is just an absolute masterpiece in my opinion. Reading this book was one of my favorite and best reading experiences that I had all year. I feel like with this story, you either absolutely love it or you kind of hate it, but I was definitely in the love group. This entire book, and I'm pretty sure the entire series, is just these characters making bad decision after bad decision, but it's so entertaining. Like, it literally feels like you're watching a crazy reality show, but it's also incredibly relatable at the same time. I remember back in like April or May, I described this story as reading about these really relatable characters that are living very unrelatable lives because they're literally like kids of billionaires and they have like all this money, no care in the world, but they all make very human mistakes, and I am obsessed with everything about it. Okay, next is this one. This is Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl. This is the other Renee Rosen book I was talking about. This one is also a historical fiction, but in this one, the powerful figure that you're reading about is Estee Lauder, and how Estee Lauder became Estee Lauder, like this billion-dollar company, and how she started it from literally the ground up. The setting of Park Avenue Summer was 1960s New York City, and this one is New York City in the 1940s. Like with Park Avenue Summer, this one is also a really great story. It has heart, it has wit, you're gonna laugh, you're gonna cry, you're gonna feel empowered, but you're also gonna see how tough and how hard it is to become a powerful figure if you're starting from the bottom. I cannot recommend this one and Park Avenue Summer enough. For the 10th spot in this video, I was debating between two books. They were these two right here, Fourth Wing and 1,000 Boy Kisses. I loved both, but I definitely have to give the 10th spot to this one. I just honestly really loved this story. I did need like the first 100 pages to kind of like normalize everything about this book, because I needed to realize that like, okay, there are going to be dragons in the story, and like there is magic, and there are like all of these things that are usually not in the stories I read. But I would say after the first 100 pages, it was literally such an enjoyable story, and I loved it so freaking much. And I did not expect to love it as much as I did. I knew I was gonna like it, but I did not think I was gonna like it this much. This was a 5-star read for sure. Okay, and this book, 1,000 Boy Kisses, is gonna be like my honorable mention in this video. After thinking about it, I wouldn't say that this is like one of my favorites of the whole year, but it was a really good one. I think the only thing that was a little bit off-putting about this story is that it was like a teenage romance, it was a high school romance, it was a YA book, so there is like a little bit of immaturity from both characters, which is normal because they're teenagers. I'm usually not a fan of like teenage romance stories, so that was the only part that felt like I had to kind of get through that to really enjoy it. But because I've literally never cried harder with a book than I have with this one, because of that reason, I feel like I have to mention this book. In the first like 5 chapters, you're gonna know pretty much what's gonna happen in the book, but I went through it anyway and I cried like a literal child. This takes the spot for the saddest book I read this year for sure. But anyways, with all of that being said, those were my favorite books of 2023. I'm not sure if it's going to be the next video or the one after that, but I will be filming the video where I share with you guys all of the books I read in 2023, which I'm super excited about. But anyways, that concludes my favorite reads of 2023. It's so insane that we're literally about to start 2024, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're not subscribed to my channel, make sure to subscribe. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!